Today's video will be related to troubleshooting vacuum problems with your HVAC system or climate control system. And along the way also I'll be looking at solving one problem that I've been chasing for a while, and that was excessive fogging inside the car. As I've mentioned, fogging, I finally found out what the problem for what was, and apparently this flap doesn't move as it should. I replaced this vacuum actuator a while ago, but I haven't looked far enough to realize that I'm missing some parts here. And the part that I'm missing, as you can see, there's a spring there. So that spring broke. So you can see that in this position the flap got moved forward, which means it closed the fresh air intake, and this side is the recirculating position, because you can see the fan is inside, so it draws air through this opening from the cab. Now theoretically, now I still have vacuum, so if I release the vacuum and goes to zero, this flap has to close, which means closed the recirculating side, but it's not moving. It just stays in the same position. And that's the reason why you need a return spring on this flap. That it's clearly, you can see that it's broken on my car. I got my spare parts. I also found a spring that I've modified, and I've installed it in a mechanism over here.
This is how this mechanism is supposed to work. You apply vacuum and it goes into air recirculating mode. When you release vacuum, the spring pulls it back to fresh air intake mode.
And it looks like, in order for me to get to that mechanism for the fresh recirculating air flap, I need to remove this housing that contains that flap. So the housing itself has 4 little screws holding it down. There's one here, you can see one on the side there, and there's one in the front and one on this side. And again, in order to get there, I need somehow to free this whole big heater housing assembly. So I need to be able to move it a little bit in order to get to those screws. So to do that, it looks like I need to remove this crossbar that runs from the right hand side of the vehicle all the way to the left side. So I started disassembling on the right side, and to do that, so we have 3 nuts holding, so one here, one over here, one is up here, and there's a bolt. You can see that there's a bar running down, and let's see, there's a bolt down there, you can see, so that's holding the bar. So to get this bar away, you just need to loosen this, bolt, and then let's see, when I loosen the bolt, I can move this bar away. So now this side is kind of free. Plus there's 2 bolts on this side over here and down here holding this whole bar to the frame. So now moving to the left side. Now this is just for the record, so I can assemble it all back. This wire runs behind this, and it's just on top of this bar. These 2 wires they're gonna be on top, and later I'm gonna drop them down in behind over here. So this one runs to the light in the glove compartment, and this green plug runs to the switchover manifold, so goes behind. Now that's all there. This is nothing here. Okay, and this. Now this cluster, or this bunch of switches, so the wires run on top. Okay, and then this wires, this is all on the bottom, and that's come from this side. Okay, and this cable is for the lock, so there's a little clip over here that's holding it later. Okay, so that's all. Looks like it's away, so it shouldn't prevent from removing this crossbar. So left side, looks like first I need to drop the steering column. Now to drop the steering column, I need to remove, there are two nuts holding from the back. Where's this little plate? Okay, so there's the plate over here. So there's one nut on this side, and there's another nut over here. Let's see if I can. Alright, so it's somewhere here. So then the bottom of the steering wheel will be free, and I need to move over. And remove two bolts holding the top. There's one here and one here. So that will free the steering column. So let's do this. Alright, so the steering column is down. I left this back. I removed the nuts, but I left the steering column engaged and just dropped it down off here. So it's kind of hanging there. I'm not sure what's holding it. Just making sure that there's no wires stretched or anything. So next, I think I need to remove this grounds because they are quite short. So I'm gonna pull these grounds off and just leave them hanging. Alright, so I removed the bolts on the left and I removed the two bolts on top. So now this bar is kind of loose, and I was able just to slide just a bit this housing to get to this bolt on the side, and I used this small tool to get this screw out. So what I have left, there's two more screws, one on the left and one's in the front. So let's see how I can get to those screws without removing this whole thing. Alright, so next, just to give me a little bit more room to push this housing down, I try to remove this air duct. So to remove it, just lift the carpet and you'll see there's a screw holding it here. So remove the screw, then slide this duct forward, and then you'll be able to slide it down kind of in such motion and take it out. Alright guys, so I continue my path of destruction, and so what I've done, I removed the carpet and there's three plastic nuts holding this plate over there, so I put it down trying to get behind to the screw that's in the front of this. Now by pushing it out a little bit, I was able to get access to the side, so I took out this screw. So all I have now is just one screw that's holding it in the front. and I'll be working to get to that screw. And I guess that's half of a problem, because after I take it out, I still need to figure out how do I assemble everything back. How do I put all the screws back? So that's the pile of parts that I've taken off so far. Well guys, I just couldn't get to that screw in the front, so I don't know what else to do. Nothing that I've tried works so far, so I guess I'm gonna go to plan B. Alright, so this is plan B. I removed everything from here. There's like a rain tray, the wiper motor and everything, just to get to this corner. So what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to try and locate where about is that screw, and I'm going to drill a hole. So I'm going to drill about maybe a half-inch hole. Hopefully it will line up with the screw. And after I went to the store and I bought some plugs. I bought some this plastic plugs. So I'm gonna put some sealant and I'm gonna plug this hole. Theoretically it shouldn't leak in, because there's a rain tray here, so this should be okay. Same with this one. Like, there's a hole over here and it's not covered, so there shouldn't be any water in this compartment, because there's hoses in here. Sorry, not hoses. There's a wire harnesses and stuff like that. So let's do this. I'm gonna try and locate that head of the screw, and I'm gonna drill the hole. Alright, so what I've done, I've measured the distance, I've measured the opening, so that's about 210 millimeters, and I've marked 105 millimeters over here, and then I used my tape and I inserted the tape behind here, and I kind of put my fingers in where I can feel the screw, and I measured the distance on this side. So I got about 65 millimeters from the edge down to here. So now I've drilled a smaller hole, and then with the bigger size, can't remember what's the other size, maybe a 1/8 or 3/16. Alright, so I got the hole drilled. I got it up to 31/64. Basically the next size is going to be ½ inch. I just want to try and see how this plug is going to fit, and I'm not sure if I can line up the camera, but you can see there's a head of the screw right there. So it could have been just a hair to the left, but I think I can still see it, and I can still get to the screw. Alright, so 13/34 didn't quite fit the plug, so I've opened up the hole to ½ inch, and I cleaned up the edges, and the plug just went in nicely, so it's nice and snug. And I assume if I'm gonna put some sealant, that should be sitting there pretty good. Alright, so I was able to unscrew that little screw, and then using a magnet just fish it out. So moment of truth, let's go around and see if I can pull off that housing. Alright, so isn't that awesome? Because now I got the housing out, and you see that was the screw in the back that was holding. Alright, so now I can get to that mechanism and I can repair it. So taking off this mechanism is fairly simple. There's 3 screws There's 1, 2, 3. So these ones I managed to get while this thing was inside, but this one was a problem. So now I can just take this one off. And this mechanism, see, comes off. Okay, now I guys promised you to show how this mechanism works, or how to take it apart, and also explain why the spring keeps breaking. So to take it apart, like I said, you push this, bring the gear over, swing this up, take it off, then you swing the gear back. You see there's a wider gear over here. You bring it to this position, you flip it over. Let me get the screwdriver. Okay, so now you insert the screwdriver over here, you push it back, and at the same time you have to push the gear out. See if I can do it with my hand. Yeah, almost. So then you turn it over in this position and the gear comes off. Okay, now this gear just slides off. Now if you flip it over, see if I get kind of a better light. So now this is the post where the spring get attached, and if you see, normally when people design something like that, they would make a round post just like on the back over here. And the reason for that, let me see, where's my spring? Yeah, the reason for that is because most of the springs come kind of like that, with the round loop at the end. So when you place the spring something like that with the loop, that has room to swing around as the spring works. Now looking at this piece, you can see how this piece is elongated, which leads me to believe that initially this was a round post, and then either kept breaking, or for some strange reason they decided to extend it, or maybe just so they can put a little notch in it for the spring to sit. But anyway, since they've done that, the loop on the spring disappeared. And like I said, I'm just making my assumptions because I actually haven't seen the actual spring, but from what I'm thinking, so extended loop, and the way this gear works, it always pulls on the spring and it goes kind of over the center. So this location where the hook, there's that hook is attached to the spring, or where the transition goes, it's always working. It almost, you're doing this. If you take, so eventually it will fatigue, and that's why it breaks, and that's why lots of W202 chassis have this problem. So digging out on the bottom of my footwell, so this is the leftover of a spring, and like I said, this is exactly where it breaks, right there. You see this position? This is where the spring is fatiguing and it's breaking off. So kind of confirms my theory. Also, what I noticed, I need to glue this piece in place. because it's kind of a loose and I don't like it, so I will glue that in place. Also, I might want to look replacing the foam. I glued in some foam just to replace that foam pads that were here, because they all were crumbling and the foam was falling off. So I glued both sides. So now it should be ready for reassembly. Alright, so the mechanism is in place and this thing is ready for installation. Alright guys, took me a while, but I finally got this thing in place, and I can tell you that it wasn't really easy. First of all, you're gonna need these tools. So you're gonna need a 1/4 inch wrench. You're gonna need this little ratchet that fits this kind of adapters, and this is a little bit with the Torx on the end. I think it's Torx 20. So you're gonna need this for sure in order to get around to tighten those little screws. So, and also very important, if you have really big hands, that's probably not the job for you, because you're gonna need to get around and to reach the screws, especially this one on the left. What I had to do, basically, I lifted this housing and I slided it to the right. Then I was able to have enough room to put the screw in the flange of this housing, and then I moved it back and I lowered it in place. Otherwise you just can't reach there to insert the screw. So then when I had this screw in place, I used this adapter to get in, and I used my hands to tighten it. And when it was close to tightening, I used this little 1/4 inch wrench, and you can hold this top with your finger, and with the other hand you can use the wrench to tighten it. So that was the difficult part. This one is a breeze, no problem. The one on the right, you can see there's a little the screw on the right, you can kind of reach there. There's a little bit of room, so that's not as big of a problem. So all these screws are tightened, so now I can go to the front and tighten the last screw and plug the hole. Alright, so the screw is there. I'm not sure if you can see it. So all I need to do, just get my screwdriver, Torx 20, so I can reach inside and tighten that screw, and this is done. So now I'm just going to apply some sealant here and put the plug. So I applied some former gasket number 2. There's my plug. Place it here and push on it, and the thing it in. And that should do it. Alright, so I have the steering column back. It's all tightened up. This crossbar is also tightened. I have tightened all the screws that are holding the heater housing. So it's pretty much ready to put the dash back. But before I do that, I want to test one more time all the lines, make sure nothing shifted and nothing is leaking. And you can see I've started testing this actuator, and my fresh air or recirculating air flap is working. So I've applied about 12 inches of vacuum, and it's draining very slowly, so it works. Now if I release the vacuum, that's closing. Now if I apply vacuum again, so that's about 5, and you see it's already opened. And if I go to 10, and here we go, 12 inches on that. And doesn't seem to have an immediate leak. So I'm gonna leave that for a few minutes and see how long does it take to drain all the vacuum.